guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you stopped by today because today we are continuing our Halloween themed projects and I'm going to be doing a werewolf for you. I think I've done a few before, probably last year or something, and I thought it'd be really fun to add to the Halloween projects for this year. Anyways, let's get started. Okay guys, the first thing that we're going to work on is going to be the sewing for the body. So I'm going to show you the pattern, all the fabric pieces, and we're going to put it all together. Now this pattern looks a little odd because it's kind of humanoid but kind of not, so it is going to look a little strange until you get everything put together. So right here I have the chest piece. This also counts as the under part of the neck, and normally when I do my patterns this would be just the belly piece, but it's the chest piece for this piece. And then this pattern is going to be for the sides of the werewolf, and then we also have a piece for the tail. And then I have a pattern piece for both the arms and the legs. This will work for both sides of the arms and legs, you just have to flip the pattern over before you cut out your fabric. Now normally with werewolves, a lot of people like to stay more around the really dark color palettes, kind of more of a dark gray or something, but I wanted to go for more of a lighter color because my style I want to do for this is going to be a bit more friendly looking, so I'm actually going to go more with the khaki colors than anything else. I'm also going to be using two different colors for this. I felt like having the chest and the under parts of the limbs being a lighter color, so this is more of a creamy off-white, and then the back part is going to be more of a kind of yellowish, almost orangish khaki color. It's a lot brighter and just has a bit more vibrancy than the belly piece. So we're going to start with the tail first. Normally this is the easiest part to sew, so I'm just going to get it out of the way real quick. So I'm going to take the left and right pieces of the tail, I'm going to sandwich them together with the fur on the inside, and I'm going to sew all the way around. So for the belly piece, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew all of our limbs to the belly piece. Now if you want, you can actually just cut out your fabric like this all put together, but I wanted to save fabric and it's just easier to kind of cut up the pattern into different pieces and sew it together. You get more out of your fabric this way. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the sides. I'm going to sew my arms and my legs to both sides. Now we need to sew our legs and our arms. So we're going to take that belly piece with those leg pieces and arm pieces, and then we're going to take our side pieces with the other half of the legs and arms. We're going to lay everything out and we're going to sew down the front of the arms and the front of the legs. We're going to leave the back portion open because we want to add a wire frame to this, and it just makes it a lot easier to leave that unsewn until everything is put together. After all of your sewing is done, you're going to have something like this. Now the tail piece is going to be added on later when we're putting it on the wire frame, so we're pretty much done with the sewing right now until we have to put everything together. So now we need to make our clay pieces. So for our clay pieces, we need to make a head, we need to make the hands, and then we also need to make the feet. So I'm going to start with the head first. I'm going to start with taking a lump of tin foil. I've got it roughly shaped out into what I want the head to look like, and I'm just going to completely cover this in a layer of clay. The type of clay I'm using is Original Sculpey, and you should be able to find it at any local art store. So I've got my tin foil covered, I've smoothed out all my clay so it's a nice clean surface to work with, and we can start adding the details. So the first detail that we're going to add is going to be the eyes. Now because I want our werewolf to look actually a bit more friendly, I'm going for a larger eye than I normally would if I was to make it kind of scary. If you want it to look scary, I would recommend going a lot smaller with the eyes, because then you can give it kind of that beady-eyed look. So I'm going to take two large balls of clay and I'm going to push them into the face where I want the eyes to go. After that, I'm going to take some strips of clay and I'm going to lay them out over the eye to make the eyelids, and then I'm going to blend that into the face. Now we're going to make the nose, so I'm going to add a little bit more clay to the end of the snout just because it's not pointed enough for what I want to do. I'm going to blend that all in, and then I'm going to start using my tools to make the nostrils and then defining the shape of the nose. Now lately I've been doing a lot of furred faces, so I haven't been doing a whole lot of sculpting with my faces, but this piece I felt like going back to just sculpting the whole thing, so we're going to add quite a bit of detail to this face, and we're not going to cover it in fur. But if you wanted to have your werewolf with a nice furry face, all you need to do is kind of what I did already, and then just define where the mouth is. You don't have to do all the other details if you want to cover it in fur because you won't see it. So after I have my nose placed, I'm going to define the shape of the mouth. I'm going to add some strips of clay to make where the lips are. I'm going to blend all that in and just get it to where I like the expression of it. Now with this piece, I did want the mouth slightly open just to show off a little bit of the teeth. Now the last little bit of detail that I want to add before I add all the fur texture to the face is I want to add a scar going across the snout, just to make it look a little bit spooky, but not super scary. So I'm going to mark out 3 little scratches going across the snout. I'm going to define it a bit more with my tool, make sure I like the shape of it, and then we can use our other tools to start adding fur texture around this and all the other detail. After we're done with all the fur detail, this is basically done. Now you're welcome to bake this now, and I would bake it at 275 Fahrenheit for about 45 minutes, but I want to bake it with all the other clay pieces, so I'm just going to set it off to the side. So now we're going to work on the hands and feet of the werewolf. Now I have to have a wire frame for this, otherwise they're going to be very fragile. It's just a bunch of pieces of wire put together and bundled together, kind of like a bouquet in a way, but they're laid out in a way where all the fingers are positioned where I want them already. And then the only difference with the wire frame for the feet and the hands is the hands have an extra piece of wire for the thumb. So they're basically the same, just you add one more extra wire to it. So what we're going to do first for our hands and feet is we're going to take a little bit of clay and we're going to cover up that portion where all the wires are bunched together, just to make sure that we can bake those into one solid piece and they don't move around as much. So we're going to do that, and we're also going to take a little bit of clay and put them on the tips of each wire to make the claw. We're going to shape those a little bit, and then we're going to put these all in the oven at 275 Fahrenheit for probably just 20 minutes. After that's done baking and is cool to touch, we can start working on the under part of the hands and the feet. So kind of like the paw pads or the palm of your hand. So for this, we're just going to take some strips of clay. I've already got them cut to fit the wires, and we're just going to push them onto the bottom part of the wire, and then we're going to start shaping them and using our tools to make some wrinkles and bend points. After you have all of your fingers covered, we're going to move on to adding a little bit more clay to the palm just to shape it up a little bit more, because it shouldn't be that flat. It should have a little bit of a kind of a fatty bit right where the fingers are, and then you're also going to have a bit of a more defined shape right where the thumb connects. So there's a big muscle where the thumb would be, so you're going to add a little bit more clay right under where the thumb is. After you're done with the bottoms of all your hands and your feet, we're going to put these in the oven again at 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 35 minutes this time, just because we have a little bit more clay now. After our clay hands and feet are out of the oven for the second time and they've cooled, we can start working on the tops of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay some clay over the tops of all the fingers and the tops of the palm, and I'm going to use my little tool to scratch this into kind of a furry texture. So that's all you really need to do to the tops of them. If you want, you could also have this with just fur fabric and not have them sculpted, but I felt like doing a lot more sculpting with this piece. So again, I'm just covering up the tops of each finger and each toe with a little strip of clay. I'm pushing it in a little bit and then using my tool to just scratch it up a bit. And then I'm doing the same thing to the back of the palm, just covering that with more clay and then scratching it in to make it blend into the fingers. Once I have all my fur texture sculpted, I'm just going to clean up the edges a little bit, and then we can bake these for one final time, 275 Fahrenheit for probably about 45 minutes this time. Okay, all of our clay pieces are out of the oven and have cooled, and we can start on the painting. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to primer everything. So I'm going to primer my clay pieces to match the fur that's going to be on the back of the werewolf, so the darker, more kind of yellow fur color. So I'm going to go over the face, the feet, and the hands and make sure everything is primered. We're going to let that dry, and then we can start adding some details to it. So I'm going to start by painting the face first, and then we can move on to the feet and hands. So the first thing I'm going to do for the face is I'm going to add some highlights to it. So I've taken the same color that we used for primering and I lightened it up a little bit, and we're going to go over certain spots that we want brighter. After that, I'm going to paint the inside part of the mouth and the teeth. So I'm going to go over the inside part of the mouth. You're going to get stuff on the teeth anyway, so you're going to paint those after you get that pink in place. I'm also using that same pink color for the inside parts of the nostrils and a little bit around the eyes. After I have that in place and it's dried, I'm going to go over the teeth with a nice white color. After that, I'm going to use that same off-white that we used on the teeth, and I'm going to go over the eyes to clean them up a little bit before we add all the other detail to them. I'm going to finish painting the rest of the nose, and I'm just going to go over it with a nice black. I'm also going to use that same black to paint the inside parts of all the little scratches that are on our snout. Going back to the eyes, I felt like giving our werewolf blue eyes just because I was going with a lighter color palette, and I thought blue would look really nice with that. So I'm going to go over the eyes with that blue. I'm going to have to let it dry before we can add the pupil and the highlights, so I'm going to go back to our scars now, and I'm going to paint a little bit of red in there. And then once our eyes are dry again, we can add our pupil, add a little bit of white to make a highlight to it, and then I think we're pretty much done right now. Now that we're done with our face, we can start painting our hands and feet. So I'm going to add a little bit of a highlight to the tops of all of the fingers, and then we can move on to painting the palms. So for the palms, I'm going to use that same kind of pinkish color that we used on the face for the inside parts of the mouth and nostrils. That way everything kind of matches. So I'm going to paint over that, let that dry. I'm going to also add a little bit of a highlight to that after that's dried. And then the last thing we'll need to do is we'll need to paint the nails. And I figured we're going to go for a lighter color, so I'm just going to go with a gray. And then once all of our painting is done, we're going to let it dry. Once our paint is dry, we can go over everything with a nice layer of resin. That's going to have to dry overnight, and then after that we can put everything together. Okay, it's the following day. We've got all of our pieces ready and we can start putting our werewolf together. So I've made a very simple wire frame using the measurements from our pattern, and I'm going to start putting everything together on that frame. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add our clay feet to the wire frame. So I'm going to take our clay feet, you notice that there's a little wire hanging out, and I'm going to take a thinner wire and we're going to wrap this wire onto the wire for the wire frame and put everything together. We're going to do it to both back feet, and then we can start adding the fabric body over this. So we're going to take the fabric for the legs, and we're going to take the very end of each leg and we're going to glue it to the base of that foot. So I'm going to use a combination of E6000 glue, and we're going to also use a little bit of hot glue to hold everything to place while that's curing. After you have the fabric glued into place around the base of the foot, you can now sew up the back of the leg. So while we're sewing up the back of the leg, we're also going to be stuffing it, that way it's a lot easier. After you're done sewing the back legs, we can now add the tail to the piece. So I'm going to take that tail that we sewed earlier and we're going to run it over the wire for the tail. Then we just need to sew the base of the tail to the body. Now we're going to move on to the arms. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the wires for the arms and we're going to run it through the fabric body because we have two little holes that it needs to go through. And then we're going to do the same thing we did with the back feet, and we're going to take the hands and wrap the wires around to connect it to the wire frame. Then we can take the fabric for the arms and we can glue it around the base of the wrists. Once that's in place and is cured, we can sew up the bottom part of the arm, and we can also stuff it like we did with the legs. Now we need to add the head to the piece. So we're going to take our little clay head and we're going to glue it to the end of the wire for the neck. After that, we can add the fabric for the neck around the base of the head. So we're just going to glue it around the base of the head. After you have your head in place, now what you need to do is you need to finish stuffing the rest of the body, and then you can sew up the back of the wolf. So the body is basically done right now. We just need to finish up the detail around the face. So what we need to do is we need to add some ears and then just kind of finish up the edges of it. So I made some really simple ears. I just used some felt and a little bit of the fur fabric that we used for the back of the body. I sewed it together and we're just going to glue it into place on the face. After we have both ears in place and we like it, we're going to take a little bit of fur fabric and we're going to take a strip of it and we're going to cover up the seams of those ears. That way everything looks a little bit better. And then after that, we are pretty much all done with our werewolf. Okay guys, and that's how I did a werewolf. I had so much fun making him. I'm gonna have him along with a bunch of other creatures in my Etsy shop, so make sure to check the links down below for that if you want to buy anything. I think I'll be able to get at least one more. I'm gonna try for 2, but I know for sure I can get one more Halloween project out for this month, and I think I'm gonna try and make them like skull and bones kind of themed. I really want to do some skeleton creatures. Anyways, keep an eye out for that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!